going?
Yep. So I'll do roll call. I'm here. Julie Siestreem is here. Jemiah. Alyssa is not able to join us today. Val Switzler. Diane Tiemann. And Malia, you're representing the Burns tribe, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Michael Cherry. Angela Fasana. Jennifer Jackson. Melissa Montero. Becky Cantrell. Marcia Frost. Jory Spencer. Jamie Crane. Jesse Jackson. Jennifer Reed.
Present.
Okay, we do not have quorum.
Thank you.
Sonya, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely, ma'am.
When we don't have quorum, does that mean that we go ahead with a meeting, but we don't make any decisions?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, we don't have any decisions that need to be made today anyway, so obviously we want as many people to be here as are able, but we're still able to go through with what we had scheduled for today. So welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. Others might pop in later. That tends to happen. I didn't hear from anyone else that they weren't able to attend, except for I know Jen Reed is going to be hopping off a little early. So I'll go ahead. I do have a slide deck, so I can pull that up and just start with a quick overview of the meeting and what we're going to be covering today. Most of it is focused on the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund and updates associated with the legislative session, and also some planning pieces that are related to it, and sort of looking at what TAC has to work on in the coming months, as well as after TAC sunsets, kind of a quick view into that part of the future. And then I have a reminder about the Child Care Infrastructure Fund, and we have tribal discussion time. So I have the legislative updates, just DELC general legislative updates first. So I don't know, Kathy or Alyssa, either of you can go ahead and take this one.
Sure. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Happy Wednesday. Kathy here as the Interim Government Affairs Manager for DELC. And yeah, as Dana mentioned, we have just been quite busy as an agency just during the last couple of weeks of the legislative session starting in late January. I won't go through all of the different presentations that DELC was a part of, but you can see here that we have gotten a lot of interest and requests from legislators, particularly in the House Early Childhood and Human Services Committee, and also the new Senate Early Childhood and Behavioral Health Committee, to give basically an informational presentation on DELC and our services and our programs. And so I think I saw Alyssa join, but she has been going and giving a lot of these presentations in front of committees, and also naming TAC and honoring the work around tribal sovereignty that you all are doing, and also just consulting DELC with recommendations that are going to be good for your families and your communities and your tribes. And so With that, we also recently had 4 days of budget presentations. This is to the Joint Ways and Means Education Subcommittee. So this is the committee that's really focused on budgets for state agencies. And so DELC was invited to give an overview of our budget as well as funding requests for the next biennium. Alyssa was there, and she definitely mentioned the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. And so we just continue to receive really good engagement and feedback from legislators around the Early Learning Plan and Fund. And the exciting thing that now I want to note is next Tuesday on the 18th, there is a work session that is scheduled for the bill. So that's your bill, House Bill 2815. And I know that a couple of weeks ago, Dana, Paulina, Julie, Angela, folks were there to help testify on the bill, and we've also received lots of written testimony on the bill as well. So thank you so much for your advocacy efforts towards moving that bill forward. Like I mentioned, next Tuesday, the bill is getting a work session in the House Early Education and Human Services Committee at 8 a.m. in the morning. And I know that Dana and several folks will just be tuning in to watch how the work session goes. And the purpose of the work session is really to just move the bill out of that committee and for it to be referred to the next committee. So the bill will likely get voted out, and it will get referred over to the Ways and Means Education Subcommittee. And as I mentioned before, we've already been doing a lot of education and a lot of pre-work, letting that committee members know about the incredible work of TAC, just all of the efforts that you all have put in creating the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. And so we're hoping that whenever that bill gets scheduled in the Education Subcommittee, that there'll be full support on that bill as well. And we know that it's also part of the governor's recommended budget. So that's also an important point to highlight. And that's all I have for legislative updates so far. We're also paying close attention to a March 21st legislative deadline date. And so that is the next big deadline where a bill needs to have a public hearing and a work session scheduled by that date. If it doesn't have any of those, then essentially bills die. And so what that really just means for us and other agencies is that we'll have less bills to track after the March 21st deadline. And then I thought this was also just a quick nerdy fact that I wanted to share, but this legislative session, there has been 3,317 bills that have been introduced in this legislative session. And I think the last long legislative session, it's averaged around 2,700 bills that have been introduced. So this session by far has seen just the most amount of bills being introduced. And so it's just something interesting to highlight. And like I said, many of these bills will unfortunately die because they won't be heard in committee, or they won't have a work session that's scheduled by the 21st. And with that, happy to take any questions.
Sonya, is it okay to ask a question?
Yes.
I just wanted to check with you, Kathy. One of the things, correct me if I misunderstood, but we did a lot of work to put this together, and we passed it on in a timely manner, but there was a glitch, and we had to go through a different kind of process than what we had hoped. And so it was, while we did the presentation and we made our best effort and that kind of thing, and we have the governor, you said that this is a part of the governor's recommended budget. Do you have a positive feeling about us being able to pull this off, or do you think that there's some kind of, possibility that we won't be able to get it to come to pass?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Julie. I don't know if Alyssa wants to add anything, but all we have been hearing so far are just positive statements about the bill, about, again, just the importance of the $4.7 million that's being added onto this, as well as additional technical assistance support. So I personally have heard nothing but just really great enthusiasm and support on this bill. You know, again, like, we're continuing to have one-on-one conversations with members of the Ways and Means Budget Committee, especially the co-chairs, just so that they have a lot of information and education about this bill. But I haven't heard any trepidation or concerns or anything like that about the bill getting passed with the full funding amount this session. We know that there's going to be further discussions around just you know, how tribes are going to use the funding in your own way that's culturally specific, culturally responsive, and also just sort of meeting where tribes are at right now in terms of getting the funding distributed and allocated and all of that. Those are more of just like the weedy details that if legislators ask us, we've just been saying, you know, there's a lot of work right now, a lot of conversation that TAC is having around the actual funding distribution that I think it'll also be a continued discussion that's on the agenda today. But yeah, I think everyone so far is very enthusiastic about this legislation, as well as the additional funding. I think I also want to mention that, and Dana put this in her email, but we'd also love to highlight on the 18th, when the bill does pass out of the policy committee, if there is a quote or a statement that would like to be shared by TAC or by individuals on TAC, we'd love to do just sort of like a highlight to say, you know, this bill made it across the first hurdle of getting a public hearing, and now it's passed through the work session. So if any of you are interested, I know Dana put something in an email and I think shared it out yesterday, but if anyone is interested in submitting just a quote or a statement of, you know, why this bill is really important and that, you know, you're all excited that it's going to continue to pass through this session, that would be great to highlight some of your voices in that statement.
Thank you, Kathy. There's so much anxiety right now with every day is a different day with federal monies being cut this way, that way. And I'm just so very thankful to hear so much positive support coming from the state. I can't praise y'all enough for the work that you're doing. And it's just, it's very helpful during this time of chaos and confusion with, you get one decision in the morning, you get a different decision in the afternoon, and you get a different one at night, and the next morning you get a different one. But so far, you guys have consistently been given the same information when I've been asking you questions, and I very much appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
And
And if there's
once the bill gets worked, we won't have this introduced -1 issue anymore. They'll just move the -1 forward. So all the language you worked on will become the version that gets discussed in future iterations. So that'll become less confusing or complicated going forward. And as Kathy mentioned, we're working to make sure that the co-chairs understand the difference between the birth through 5 literacy dollars that we want to set aside for tribes versus the Tribal Early Learning Fund. I will just say, though, I mean, the February, March revenue forecast was better. The May revenue forecast is the one that really determines what the budget's going to look like. So there's no guarantees. To Kathy's point, we're not getting any questions about the dollar figure in the Tribal Early Learning Fund that was put forward in the governor's recommended budget. But, you know, if the revenue forecast isn't what we hope for, there's a chance that the funding doesn't come through at that level. So the education budget is one of the last budgets that gets adopted. So it happens in mid-June. So we'll continue to make sure they have the information they need to kind of make their decisions as budget chairs.
I just also wanted to note that we do have quorum now.
Thank you so much.
I see Jemiah, Angie Fasana, and Becky Cantrell are here. So thank you all for joining, and Jemiah, hope you're feeling okay. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next area? Yeah. Well, hearing none, we'll go ahead and the next item was just to kind of debrief how the public hearing went for the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. And it feels like it happened a long time ago. It was really only a couple weeks. But like Alyssa mentioned, the -1 amendment that was submitted. So in addition to Pauline and I presenting, Julie and Angie Fasano were there and provided testimony, did a great job. Additionally, 3 other tribes submitted written testimony. And so having all of that, the committee saw and heard us. So we had some positive feedback and we also got some questions. I do want to just plant a little seed for Julie and Angie to start thinking about sharing a little snippet of your experience being there and providing testimony, just because I think it's important for the group to hear it. Before we get into that, I just wanted to give a quick overview of kind of the way that presentation went if you haven't watched it yet. Basically, it started with Pauline and I doing an overview of the work and going into an explanation of what the bill does, including like the role of OTELA, what DELC will do, and then bringing it back to why this bill is so important and really making sure the committee understood this is for tribal sovereignty and the importance of having the bill and the funds for tribes to be able to pursue the early learning and care goals that they have. So the questions we received, there was a lot of things that sort of weren't related to early learning. Well, not a lot. There were like two questions that weren't exactly related. But Angie Fasana answered those questions and did an amazing job. One of the questions was about how this work is tied to early literacy or to literacy. And another question, they were just clarifications on how the voting would work, clarifications on who's in charge of funding, and just that, yes, OTELA is going to be the ones to decide how the funding distribution works, which the only voting members on OTELA will be the tribes, and that the voting is 5 of 9 tribes rather than 9 of 18 as the gauge. So we're not going to run into tiebreakers. So there were a couple specific questions for Grand Ronde. Angie, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think that it seems like an intimidating experience, but the time flies by super quick. And I do think it's really impactful for committee members to be able to ask questions to the people who are going to be the direct recipients of the funds. So if anybody has the opportunity, it's easier for me than most because I'm so close to Salem, so it's not as much of a travel for a 2.5-minute testimony. So I totally get why it's hard. But if you can, I think even being on by Zoom, having Julie on by Zoom, just so that they hear from us and are able to sort of ask us some more directed questions. I kind of found it to be a little bit fun at the end. So I'm happy to do it again.
Thank you. Julie, would you like to share a little bit about your experience being there on Zoom? Actually, it's Teams.
Oh, that was very thankful that Angela was able to come together with you in person to sit with all the people there. I think that it is so powerful. If any of us are able to be there in person, the eye-to-eye contact, the facial expressions, the spiritual experience that you have when you actually sit across the table from somebody, is just that much more powerful. I'm thankful we have Zoom for those of us that can't drive to wherever it is that we have these meetings, and for whatever reasons, whether people have family members that have health problems, or whether they can't drive, or whatever. There's a million and one reasons why people can't make the drive, but I'll be forever thankful for the two of you that you were able to sit there in person. Paulina is strong any which way, whether she's in person or on Zoom, speaking up for us and that kind of thing. But it was I was so thankful that when the different people asked Angela questions, they really wanted to know. They were asking sincere questions, and they seemed very thankful to be able to engage with her about the program that she has been so much a part of for the last over 20 years. I think she was saying one of her children was over 20, or nearing 25. I'm not sure, but nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. And her experience is so deep, and her commitment is so strong. And I know that we're fortunate to have so many others that have been boots on the ground with the children for 20 or more years here in Oregon. And whoever can speak up like that, that's going to make it. That's going to make the change. And advocating for our children in any which way you can, like that, is just so much needed and so much appreciated.
Thank you, Julie. That means a lot.
Thank you. I totally echo what Julie said. So there's the question about literacy, how this funding relates to literacy, I thought was answered really well, because there is an actual example that Angie was able to provide about how teaching the second language, they're learning English, they're learning Chinook at the dual language immersion Shawash Ilahi school, and they will get sometimes their vowels mixed up, like because they're thinking of it in a different language. They're thinking of it in Chinook, not in English. And so sometimes they need to switch it back. And when they're doing testing, because there's a question about families opting out of testing, but Angie talked about Dibble's testing, things that they do in their program, and how their literacy specialist knows that the kids are going to switch some of the words in the language, some of the sounds, and when they go through testing and the literacy specialist knows that, they score much higher. And I probably butchered that, so Angie, feel free to correct the things that I said, but that was the gist of it for the most part. And I think it showed how the things that tribes are doing, these are legitimate, kids are learning, it's might look different, and it's successful at the same time. So anyway, the hearing ended with Chair Hartman thanking everyone for giving their time, and just she really underscored the importance of tribes and honoring their sovereignty, and just really wanted DELC to take tax recommendations seriously. And so obviously we wholeheartedly agree with that. And thanks again for everyone who participated both in person, through virtual and written testimony. So
Hi, Angie, I forgot, I meant to tell you the other day too. I did follow up after that with some thank yous to a couple of the committee members, to Chair Hartman and Representative Elmer, just thanking them for questions and listening to us and supporting the bill. So just to let you know, I did reach out and send some follow-up emails.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, And for those of you who haven't watched the video or weren't there, Angie's very popular. The representatives were very happy to have her there, those who had or have had her in their districts. So thank you for also reaching out to them.
Yeah, no, but I went to high school with Representative Elmer. So when I saw her, when I entered the room, it actually was very nice to see a friendly face.
That's awesome. Yeah. Small world for sure. So after this work session happens, we'll keep you all posted. And if you're interested in giving a quote for us putting out a press release after it goes through, then I'll send a follow-up email, and you can, after this TAC meeting, and you can just reply to that, or you can call me or text me or whatever works best for you and let me know. So the next thing is preparing for the new biennium, preparing for the new tribal early learning plan and fund, intergovernmental grant agreements. So we hear it all the time about how long grants take between the state and tribes. And so the idea is we want to share the statement of work, which is the programmatic piece, with you all, and have the chance to review it. It's not the entire agreement yet. That still has to go through the procurement process, our procurement office, and then our DOJ, Department of Justice, will review that and put it together. We'll share that with you as well once we have it. But for now, just the statement of work, we want your eyes on it to give us feedback. The good thing is that the statement of work is mostly the programmatic piece, and generally there's not a lot of changes that come when it goes through procurement and through Department of Justice review. So the statement of work should stay the same even after it goes through that process. The only thing that, well, more likely what could change it is if any changes come to the bill throughout session. And so hopefully that's not the case. But we have, I think, a good groundwork. We'll share it out with you following this meeting, and we'd like to discuss it with your feedback at the April TAC meeting. There's a couple specific areas that your feedback would be most important for, and that's the background and goals section, mostly just wording, project activities and reporting requirements. That's really where I'd like to know if this feels doable and reasonable. And then there's a budget section. A lot of that is actually the same as it was last year, or well, last year and a half, for the agreements from OTELA that we've had. And also it's 7 pages, so it's not super long. And of those, 1.5 pages are kind of boilerplate language about accessibility. So you probably don't need to worry about that part. And I wanted to just see, does that sound reasonable for you all?
It's good for me.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. Anyone, you can signify with thumbs up on Zoom. Or if you have a concern with it, then come forward. All right, everyone seems like they're good with it. So that's part of my follow-up, is I'll send that out with you along with the slide deck after this meeting. We are also still looking for a list of your tribe's funding needs for early learning and childcare for the 25-27 biennium. Ideally, we'd like that in by March 28th, just so that we can prepare for questions that might come up, and to also help us with preparing grant agreements in a timely manner. And you can send it to me however you want. It doesn't need to be on a template. You can write it in a Word document, or you can use the template that I created. which I'll send that out again, just so you have it in case you do want to use it. There's also the Tribal Early Learning Plan allowable expenditures document. So I just wanted to mention that and bring to your attention that the other category was added just at the bottom, which is kind of like a catch-all for some of the bigger ticket items that haven't really been part of OTELA that will be part of the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund going forward. And so please make sure to consider some of those things in case their needs. Some of the items are like playground, non-capital remodel or renovations, vehicles to transport children. So overall, are there any questions about this and or any concerns about having this list submitted by March 28th? All right. Well, I look forward to receiving those. Thank you, Jemiah, for putting that in the chat. I heard from Jen Reed already as well, so I know that Cow Creek's good on that. If you do have any concerns, please let me know. I'll also reach out to the tribes who weren't able to attend today and make sure that they're caught up with what we've gone over and that all the plans sound good. And if there are any concerns that arise that need to come back to the full TAC, we'll have those discussions as well. Since next month, we'll talk about the statement of work. One of the areas that I think would be helpful is talking through it being a longer term agreement, and I don't know that there's any potential issues that could come up, but I would like to know if maybe there's tribal processes that we should consider and factor into the timelines. So normally we've done 2-year agreements. We're gonna try having it be, well, not try, we will do a 4-year agreement for the Tribal Early Learning Plan. And the only kind of catch with that is that we only have a budget for 2 years. So we'll send it for 4 years and you'll have the funding for sure for 25-27. We don't know what the funding would be for 27-29. So we'll have to put some language in the agreement that says the anticipated amount would be this. And, you know, there's a possibility that the state won't receive the funds, like stuff that's already, some of the stuff is already in the boilerplate parts of the grant agreement, but having a longer term grant, that's new for us for it to be 4 years. And I'm wondering from your perspective, are there any things that tribes might flag? Is there any potential issue that you could see coming up by us doing that to try to make things go a little bit quicker for the second biennium, where it's just an amendment for the dollar amount?
Sonya, is it okay to say something?
Yes.
The only comment that I'd like to share was just that with that, what I've come to understand with the short time I've been in our government process from 2021 until now is the change of staff and the change of tribal council members and that kind of stuff. We have our tribal council on an alternating basis, a 3-year we contracts. We have 7 members and we stack it so that it's an elected process and there's we don't all move out at the same time. But there'll be changes in there may be changes in the tribal council during that 4-year period, and there may be changes in the staff. So that's just, you know, I don't know, you know, how relevant that is in looking at a longer term time frame. What's nice about a longer term time frame is that that it shows commitment, which I think is wonderful. Because I mean, the educational process, you know, you start from pre-K to 12, that's 13 years. So I mean, you know, it's you know, and if you add in their birth to graduation, you know, that's another 4 or 5 years there. So I don't know how that works in with the decision or not, but I just want to share those comments.
Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Sonya.
I appreciate the 4 years just because it will give us the full 2-year biennium that once the fund comes that second or the third year, because we know how long it can take, that, you know, we have been having anywhere from 6 months to a year to spend that amount of money. So with the 4 years, at least it'll allow us to hit the ground running right at that right at the start of that biennium, which will be so nice, because even though sometimes there's language that says you can backdate something, our tribe isn't one that's comfortable with doing that. And so it just will be very nice.
I just had a question, knowing that, I think last TAC, folks were leaning towards not doing an equal distribution of funding, how that will factor in, because if it's an equal distribution, we would say you're getting 500,000, right? And we're anticipating another 500,000 the following biennium. We'll confirm once we have the budget. But if we're doing this on kind of a more project-based approach, then I imagine the funding levels could really shift. And so I was just curious how that would fit in from a stability perspective. Or are we saying you'll never get less than the amount here? So I just wasn't sure. This would be our first time doing 4-year agreements. This would also be, if we're moving to a project base, it'd be very different than how we administer our other grants. And so I want to make sure we're thinking through this in a way that gives you all the stability you need and doesn't actually create more work for you in the long run.
So you said education was the last funded or last part of the budget. When would you know how much was allocated?
So we'll know how much is in the Tribal Early Learning Fund no later. Constitutional sine die is June 29th. So it has to be wrapped up by June 29th. It'll still have to go to the governor's office desk for signature and things like that, and that can take another 30 days, but we're not concerned about the Tribal Early Learning Fund. So we would be able to have the ideal here, and to Dana's point on the slide, we want to have everything ready so that all we have to do is enter a dollar amount and get those grant agreements out the door to you, which means we'll have to determine prior to that with you all how much each tribe is receiving.
When do the funds become available to start spending?
July 1st. Technically, they're not going to come into our possession until like August, September, but our grant agreements would be effective July 1st.
Okay. And so maybe, because after, like, maybe that January, or, you know, we start with TAC looking at that funding prior to and what's being put in, and so that tribes would then, because I really think that even the tribes that take less than the full amount are going to realize the benefit of what, you know, the positions that could be created. You know, we're looking at social emotional positions that can, or literacy. I mean, I just think that there's so much that can be done, and that's the value of the tribes talking. And, you know, we love to hear what Grand Round's doing. We love to, you know, when Sandy used to update us on what Cow Creek was doing and with their early learning, because that was like really big for them. It just I think they'll realize and the potential of that money, of that funds, because we're already thinking, you know, if this is, you know, even equitable pay for, you know, staff. Just so many things that, you know, we were very competitive prior to a lot of the OPK dollars and all of that, that, and then we're not anymore, community action here is several dollars more than we are. So,
Yep.
just those potentials of giving people, really living wage, amounts is just exciting to think about.
And so one thing we might need to think about, knowing that March is just flying by and July's around the corner. So knowing that we're going to have to make decisions about distribution really in the next couple of months, one thing to consider might be anything over 500,000 would need to be one time, right? Because to your point, Sonya, if you're using your funds for wages, you need to be able to count on those dollars. And so if a tribe that only wanted 100,000 suddenly wants 200,000, it's going to have to come away from a different tribe. And so that's just a factor. And I apologize, Dana, as you were talking, the thought just popped into my head of like, how will this actually work together? And so I just want to make sure we're doing our due diligence at DELC to thread all the pieces and that we're raising some of these wonderings and considerations for you all. Because again, Sonya, I want you to be able to count on however much money you receive so that you can make those long-term investments. And to your point, if a tribe says we could use more, I don't want it to just be contingent on the Tribal Early Learning Fund growing.
Absolutely. I just, my hope and dream is every tribe will, take the full amount for their community. But again, I've said it many, many, many times that, we've lived in this scarcity mindset for so long that to really think about how it can impact in a position. And, we know that those transitions to school, the chronic absenteeism that starts in early learning. I mean, just thinking about positions that can really support and benefit early learning, it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, no, this is a great conversation. This is exactly why I brought up the question. So like right now, with the dollar amount that we're expecting, if everything stays the same, what we could do is in grant agreements, 573,000 is the equal amount. So we could say this first year you get, let's just say 1 million. That seems high, but we'll just use it as an example. This first biennium you get 1 million, and next biennium you will get no less than the anticipated continuing amount of 573,000. We'll just say it stays the same. Could that be a problem for tribes when you're having it go through tribal council? Like, because I assume questions could come up about sustainability, to Alyssa's point. And I don't know, I don't know that there's any other contracts or grants that you've came across that are like that. I don't know if this has came up before. So yeah, very interested in hearing any experiences or thoughts on that.
I think for us, we would propose it to tribal council that the 500,000 is what we have to look at. Anything above that would be kind of like some of the funds we receive now in an addition to and considered one time. We wouldn't do programming or staff additions with not knowing. I mean, because again, my hope is every tribe will take it, so we would live within our means of the 500,000. That's the way that, I'm sure that my Alyssa would approach it as well, because she likes guaranteed numbers, so she wouldn't base it on the one-time potential funding.
Thank you, Sonya. So I guess what if it's in the reverse? What if you are one of the tribes that only wants a small amount, and then you see in the next agreement that it would be up to 500,000 when you only took like 100 or 200,000 the first time around? And I mean, I guess for that case, we could always formulate the agreement a little bit differently, in case you anticipate it being an issue. Usually more money is not as much of a concern as less money for planning further out.
I don't have anything on that, but I just wanted to give an acknowledgement to Angela with Grand Round, because it's where hearing their programming and expansion and everything, as well as some of the other tribes, but they're always so willing to share how they've grown their program, just really helps us think bigger and broader, and I appreciate that. So thank you, Angela, for always being there and willingness to share, because we do take it all in and look at how we can grow our programs.
Thank you, Sonia. And yes, I'm always happy to try to build. We're always stronger when we're all lifted up together as far as the 9 tribes go. So I think I think how you would write the grant agreements, just in my mind, would be you would put in that your grant amount would be up to the equal distribution amount for all the tribes, because some tribes may take less than that, and that's fine. But the grant agreement for this biennium would be for up to that. And then you would just say in there that the amount determined for the biennium, what would be 27, 29, will be determined by legislative session. So I think that you can write your grant agreement still and have it be for 4 years, and that's just how you would kind of phrase the funding. And then if for some reason there's like leftover funding and a tribe gets more than their equal distribution, you'd probably just do an amendment to the grant agreement saying that they're going to accept this additional funding. Just a thought.
Did we land, Dana, on whether folks get equal, and then if they're underspending, we redistribute, versus everyone applies at the outset? I mean, that, I think, to Angela's point, we have to know the process for receiving funds and be able to work with our grants team to write the grant appropriately.
Yeah, so the last Tribal Advisory Committee meeting, I believe it was the last one, that's what we had landed on, was that it would be needs-based, not equal distribution, and then reallocate. That it would be upfront, tribes saying the amount that they need. And so the reason why we're gathering the funding needs for the 25-27 biennium is to be able to take those numbers and do the math and have it be an exercise in seeing what it would look like and what amount tribes need, and then see, is there more requested than what we have? Is there less request? Like, how will the math actually work out? And I'm thinking, based on what I've heard, is that the math will end up being doable for this first biennial amount, and then we would revisit that same process for the next biennium and amend based on those amounts. But it could change. Like, it's up to you all, it's up to OTELA, once that is in existence, to make the decisions on how funding distribution could work for the future. Because maybe we try it that needs-based way this first time around, and then we realize that it's not working. OTELA can decide that equal distribution is going to work better, and we can go that route instead. Or we can continue. Did that answer your question? It's a long answer for it, but
I think probably maybe doing a written proposal, Dana. And then I think it may make sense to do a Dear Tribal Leader letter. So we're going through consultation, just recognizing that whichever path we choose has big implications for the stability of funding. And wanting to make sure everybody kind of understands what those are. And so, Dana, maybe we could put together a draft in the next week or so to circulate back with TAC before we send out a consultation request. I'm also thinking about the ed cluster last week, and Angela, your comment about like how much work does this take off your plate, right? Knowing that anytime there's an amendment, you have to go through the same legal process. And so I want to make sure we're doing what is best for you all and least administratively burdensome as possible.
Yeah, we can definitely put something together, and share it with TAC before we move into, following up on the Dear Tribal Leader letter for the Tribal Early Learning Plan and Fund. Does anyone, any other thoughts from Tribal Advisory Committee members? Well, we're flying right along. The next kind of overview of the rest of this biennium and then kind of the beginning of the next biennium is what I wanted to look at and make sure we're including all of the pieces and that these are on our radar and that we're prepared. We don't want to end up with a situation where you're short on time to spend grant funds. And so the sooner that we can start the process, the better. And so this just kind of lays out what we're looking at in a visual way. I also have this in an Excel format if that would be better for you to digest. So I can share that out as well. And it's all tentative. So this isn't a schedule that we're tied to, but it's the intention is just to be strategic and take a thoughtful approach in getting the Tribal Early Learning Plan and the Oregon Tribal Early Learning Alliance set up. So in April, in addition to discussing feedback on the statement of work for the grant, we can spend time thinking about what you're wanting for OTELA appointments, and your input is going to help guide DELC as we prepare for seeking agency representatives from the Oregon Department of Education, Educating Coordinating Commission, the Oregon Department of Human Services, and the Oregon Health Authority, which were the agencies that were specifically called out. And then DELC, our representative, would be Alyssa. So then we'll also have to add in the piece about a proposal and consultation. So I can update that in the task list. Any questions so far? Sound okay for April? See a thumbs up from Julie. Thank you. All right. So, and then May, it sounds like is more likely when the bill would be heard in Ways and Means, just because of the revenue forecast being released then. Hopefully, we'd have the full intergovernmental grant agreements ready for TAC to review, and that's the statement of work of the grant agreement plus all of the boilerplate language. I'd also be replicating any language that was changed out of the boilerplate from this biennium into those grants. So that should help, but I still want your eyes on it in case there's things that we should change before we finalize the grant agreements and send them out officially. And so that's the idea for getting those prepared. Any considerations about looking through May so far?
Does that timeline work for folks? Sonya, to your point of like, we often give you a crunched window to spend money. If you're getting, if you're reviewing the IGAs in May, but not getting the official IGA until June, just knowing all of your processes and timelines, I don't know if that sets you up for July 1. hopefully doesn't set you up for super late into the biennium, but I just wanted to pressure test the timeline piece.
Yeah, it just depends. I mean, it takes us, you know, a minimum of a month to get on tribal council or to get things signed. So it just depends on when Alyssa gets them and able to package them up and get it on the council agenda for them. So it can be the following month that we're getting it, but we will work with it.
I have a clarifying question. So if what we have is just a draft grant and it's not like the final official version with the dollar amount in there, would it still be able to be reviewed, or would, I'm assuming that for some tribes, council wouldn't even look at it until it's actually finalized?
Right. For us, it would.
It
It's
would,
the same for Grand Ron, but I think that if I have a draft, I can send that to the tribal attorney's office. And at least that's where some of the hangup is for us, is back and forth with the state to change provisions. So I could at least send the draft to the tribal attorney's office, but no, I wouldn't be able to send it to council till it's final.
It's the
And
same,
that's,
it's the same for us too, with Confederate Tribes of Coos, Umpqua, and Siuslaw.
okay,
and that would be the same process with us that Angela just mentioned as well. It would go through the tribal attorney first for language, and then, so it is good to have the draft beforehand, because at least we can take care of that part, then go to council for the final.
okay. So then this would be good for us to share out the draft that is not final for council to review, but it's before the biennium even, the new biennium even starts, and it gives you a chance to confer with your legal staff, and it gives us, and then you can tell us what needs to change before it's the official final version that does go to council, and we save time at that stage.
Yes.
Okay. That's what I thought. That was the intention. So we'll, hopefully May is when we'll have that by. I don't anticipate that we could I mean, who knows? Maybe we could have it in April, but I think May is more realistic when we'd be able to get that draft. Okay, so then bittersweet, June's gonna be the last TAC meeting, and we can definitely make good use of that time. I think besides just reflecting on how far we've come and giving a chance to share gratitude for what we've been able to do, that we can use the June time as a chance to get like final feedback. We put together a draft of like the OTELA appointment forms for the new advisory body, and we'd hopefully be able to send those in June, since the bill should be passed by then. It might be the funding piece we're not sure about till later in the month. Right, Alyssa?
That's right.
And we know it will take some time for tribes to appoint people to OTELA. And so if we can at least get that letter out in June, then hopefully over July and August, we'd be able to get our appointments. And I mean, maybe a little bit later than that as well. Are there concerns, or do you see anything that's missing on what we have so far through June? Are there any wonderings about some of these next steps, or we feel good? And I'm going to take that as a we feel good and move on to a sneak peek into the new biennium. Okay, so a good topic that came up is when the first OTELA meeting would be. How does September sound? I know education departments have a lot going on all the time. Summers are usually pretty active, but I mean, September is also the first month of the school year, so really would love your feedback.
It's good for us.
Thanks, Julie. So if we do September as the first OTELA meeting, I mean, if we've sent out the tribal, the letter to tribes in June asking for OTELA appointments, that gives us June, July, and August. And then we'd meet in September. Does that feel like enough time for your tribes to appoint people for OTELA? Or does September sounds good to Jemiah as well? Thumbs up from Malia. Okay, so go ahead.
What is on September, what is the Explore OTELA advisory member recruitment?
Yes, so that is a topic that I'm hoping if the first meeting of OTELA is in September, I think the major things that the advisory body would be looking at are how to what its membership like bylaws would look like, what the tribal early learning plan, a plan for writing the plan probably, and then in the statute it talks about having OTELA advisory members who are non-voting. That would be at minimum 2 parents or caregivers, and then 2 providers or tribal educators. So I think what we would want to do is start on the OTELA tribal representation, and then determining from you all what you want out of the agency representatives. And then once OTELA is formed, coming up with the process for recruiting those community members. And like, do you want it to be an application process? Do you want, like, how do you want that to look? And so that was my bullet point for that. That was a good question. And then so then our next OTELA meeting, another thing to consider is, since we'd be doing bi-monthly, is that we could do like every other meeting being in person or hybrid, and they could be, if we needed, like while we're getting a lot of things built out, they could be longer meetings, like a half-day work session type of thing. And then the second bi-monthly meeting, just virtual for like a 90-minute kind of thing, like what we're doing now. But I have it in my list on the last slide to send out a scheduling survey in April to start looking at some of that. Go ahead, Sonya.
I would just like to also suggest that maybe to have DELC be put on, and Angela and any other G2G representatives, please chime in, but to maybe on the tribal day call for the subcommittee that we talked about through G2G to talk about this, just because not all of the tribes appoint their education director like here to TAC, but I think it's really important for all the ed directors to understand the ask, the change, what's coming, so they can talk to their tribes, because I think that's where some delays have happened in the TAC. And so I would really like to see us either have a subcommittee meeting or just bring it to the full tribal day during the June G2G, just so that everyone knows and updated, because not all the ed directors attend these meetings.
Yeah, and go ahead, Alyssa.
Oh, I was going to say too, I think there's an element of, to that point, Sonya, we don't know who all is getting appointed. And so some of these questions about timing, we can say September, but bi-monthly, hybrid, we also need to give the folks who are appointed the space to give us that feedback. And so we'll do our best for planning, and it may shift. I think it's just a good reminder that we don't really know for sure who will be OTELA.
Yeah, so we can, exactly. So we'll do a scheduling survey to kind of give us a framework to work off of. And similarly, if it's tough, right? Because this group is telling, this is TAC, and TAC can tell, we're talking about technically the tribal hub. And I'm asking feedback from you all on as if you're OTELA, which you're not yet. And there might be different people. Some of you probably will be the same, but maybe not everyone. And so, like, for instance, looking at creating a tribal early learning plan and an OTELA membership charter, like, I could ask do you want DELC to start working on like creating a skeleton framework for that to give the future OTELA something to work off of when we get to September? Because we'll have a couple months between when session ends and when OTELA's tentative first meeting will be, but you're also different bodies. So it makes it a little bit tough because we're in a transition space. I feel like it's the hurry up and wait kind of thing. Like when you go to the airport, you have to get there really early and then you wait. But I mean, do any other thoughts come up as we sort of dissect this planning?
Sonya, is it okay to say something?
Yes.
One thing to consider is, you know, whatever has been done before, as far as OTELA goes, you know, the framework that, was constructed, previously, I mean, you can use that as a reference. It's not something that's gonna be the same. But I mean, if you wanted to look at that, I mean, that you could look at that, but, I think what Alyssa said, where you may have a whole new set of people and they may have, you know, all kind of new ideas and different ideas than what, the different people that originally, set up OTELA, you know, so, but they could at least see what had been created, and it might be like a starting point or discussion point.
Yeah, definitely. That's something we could do. Maybe like in the beginning, an overview of where the work came from and how we got to where we are when we do convene the first meeting, as a point of reference for some framing. And I mean, we do have some structure. We can also like lend some of what goes into OTELA from what TAC's done, but also from the the American Indian Alaska Native Student Success Advisory Committee that the Oregon Department of Education convenes. They already have their plan and they have their membership structure. And so there's lots that we could borrow and then turn into early learning. Or we can just do it totally from scratch. Either way, it's all going to be up to the tribal representatives from OTELA. And we'll just make it work.
Sonya, can I say one more thing?
Yes.
I'm sorry, but I'm gonna leave you guys a little bit early because I got some family commitments here that who was able to make it today. And if there's anything you need me to do, will you please email tell me what you need me to do, and I'll call you with that. But I humbly Angela Fasana for coming in and doing what you did for us. You're incredible. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Angela Fasana is probably having a really good day. Lots of great feedback about all the things that you do.
I know. I just wish my husband was listening.
It's recorded. He can watch the YouTube video. We'll send him the link.
I'm just joking with you.
I can deliver it, Angela.
There you go. Just keep it in my back pocket. Send him the link when I need it. I think he needs it. Thank you all.
Yeah, for a rainy day. It will be a good pick-me-up in case you ever need the confidence boost. Well, too bad Julie hopped off, but the next thing I just wanted to mention before tribal discussion is the childcare infrastructure fund. Actually, I did have rulemaking, but I don't think we have time for that. So we'll save it for the next meeting because we've ran out of time for tribal discussion on the last couple of TAC meetings, and I think that's important that we have it. So I'll just touch on the childcare infrastructure fund, and then we'll have some free talking time. So for childcare infrastructure fund that's administered through Business Oregon, they are opening their second round of funding pretty soon. The exact date I do not have, but it should be later this month, is my understanding. And the other difference between the last round and this round, besides the funding amount, I think this time it's more than it was. Last time was 15 million, this time is 25. Or the other way around. No, this time it's less. Sorry. It's close to the end of the day. I apologize. But it's a 30-day window. That's what I was getting at. The application period is shorter. And so this will mean that it could be more difficult to apply for the funds, but you still have Northwest Native Chamber, the technical assistance providers for the childcare infrastructure funds, who you can reach out to, and they are able to provide support in preparing you for the application. And so their information is here. If you haven't met Amber and Michael yet, they're wonderful. I was lucky enough to get to go visit Cow Creek 2 weeks ago, and then Confederated Tribes of Coos, Umpqua, and Siuslaw last week, along with Northwest Native Chamber. And they're amazing because they do understand the unique nature of tribes, not just like a private business or a nonprofit. They understand like the tribal council piece and that there's more involved. And so please rely on them. I'm happy to help connect you if you haven't been connected already. And it's also, I think, important to acknowledge that this is a 30-day application window is not what DELC wanted for tribes for the Child Care Infrastructure Fund. It's not, because it's administered through Business Oregon. Ultimately, they're the ones who are making those decisions, but we're going to continue to make sure that they're aware of the unique nature of tribes, and that that we're here to offer support when it comes to like creating non-competitive tribal funding structures. So fingers crossed for the future. And I also wanted to offer for inviting Northwest Native Chamber back for April's TAC meeting. If that sounds helpful, you want to do a thumbs up or come off mute and share if you'd like them to come. Would it be helpful for Northwest Native Chamber to come again and talk about the infrastructure fund? It would be April 9th is our next TAC meeting. So it'd be
The timing will be better than last time. So last time I think we had them talk the day it was due, but this should actually give a couple weeks of buffer before the deadline. So if anybody is planning to apply and would like some space here, you'd have more time to use the information if it's beneficial.
yes, I think it would be beneficial.
Thank you, Sonya.
I agree. This is Angie.
Awesome. All right, well, then I can make sure that they'll attend our April meeting. And, oh, Jemiah, I saw you're off mute, sorry.
Hey, Dana, I'm sorry. I'm home trying to take care of my sick son and I missed a question. Can you please rephrase it?
Yeah, would it be helpful to have Northwest Native Chamber, the technical assistance providers for the Child Care Infrastructure Fund, join us at April's TAC meeting?
Yes, that'd be great.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, thank you as well. Okay, then that's all I had. I'll save the piece about rulemaking for later. I will pass it over to anyone who wants to start the tribal discussion time. There's the end of my slides, so I'll stop sharing too. Sonya, earlier you had mentioned that it was really helpful to hear from Grand Ronde about all of the different early learning programs and education things that they do. And so I'm wondering, would it be helpful if we, as either as TAC or as OTELA, if we factored in time, like 10 to 15 minutes for each tribe to regularly give updates about their programs?
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's great. That's why I always ask in those one pagers to put what some of the tribes have done, you know, as non-identifiers, but just because we all do such different things, we service different areas. You know, for like us, we have, you know, 4 offices with Siletz, 3 in the valley. And so looking at different ways that other tribes are utilizing funds really gives us idea. I mean, even like from the launch pads that Cow Creek and Grand Round had done, and just going back and telling, because sometimes that's a question that we'll get is, well, is it allowable cost or other people doing it? So when we're asking, we always, you know, will say, just like when we proposed our stipend, I emailed the different tribes for laptops or for different things. I said, hey, what are you guys doing for students on that? Some were purchasing equipment, some were given stipends. So, and if they shared with us how much, then when we took the proposal back to the tribe, we said, well, you know, 6, 7 of the tribes responded, and you know, they're doing stipends in the range of this amount to this amount, and we propose this, just so that, I mean, all of us are individual and unique, but when you're creating programs, and you know, we just want to you know, say, yes, it's out there, yes, we can do this, yes, it's important and students are needing it. So I just love to hear what other tribes are doing, because again, you know, you think, okay, this is the way we've always done it, how could we expand outside of that? And so with Grand Round's great structure that they have, you know, we're talking and looking at some of those positions that they have around literacy experts, or you know, around social emotional, you know, for early learning, or different positions. We did previously have social, I can't remember what they were called, like family support positions, but when funding got cut, those positions got cut. But I think they're more important than ever. And so this is a resource for us to be able to look at those positions again. So I just think it's valuable to, again, it kind of is like a barometer for us, like, yes, other tribes are doing it. Yes, it's possible. Yes, it's gone through the process and been approved, and we're feel much better when proposing it.
I would also support it. I love learning what everybody's doing. I think the activities that everybody does is so unique, but it's just hard to think of all the things on your own. So collectively, when we share, we have a collective brain, and I definitely think it'd be great if we just took turns at different meetings sharing what we've been doing with the funding.
Yeah, and I
And
see
I-
in the chat. Oh, sorry.
I think it's one of the ways too that it can grow for, all of the tribes. Like Angela said, when you raise up one, you raise up all, and how important that is. And, when you can say, the Book-Roo subscriptions, our Head Start kids love that. If it wasn't, again, for Grand Round and Cow Creek and what they're, and the lady was so easy to work with and tailor made it, through our legal, and the owner of the company, it just was such an easy process that we, being on the parent committee, or during the tribal consultation with Portland Public School, they had extra fund, and I recommended that they do Book-Roo for their younger learners. They come right to the house. What I love about them in the Head Start setting was that the teacher could take that and make the connection between home and school, because she knew every single one of her students had just received a shipment of those books, and she could talk about it and say, oh, well, I got this book, did you get this book at your house? And, so it was a way to engage kids, and knowing that every student received the exact same item, as to where, you don't know it other people. Because I tell schools all the time, we have parents that don't allow their kids to check out library books at school, and they may not have a home library. That's why we try to grow them all the time, because they may have a child that is destructive, or they lose books, and the parent doesn't want to be responsible to replace those books, because they're expensive when you have to replace a library book. And, so they just say, I don't want my child to bring home a book. But kids love books. And so doing the Book-Roo subscriptions for that and using the early learning funds it just is such a win-win. And I only learned that through us sharing. I'd never heard of Book-Roo before, and like we're going to be with some of our funds purchasing the yodels. They are little sound players, and you can customize them with your card in languages, and we're going to put them in all of our Head Starts, and our language teacher can you can customize your own disc, and then they'll be able to send them home as well. So there's just so many great ideas out there, but if you don't know the capability and what is out there, it's, hard to think of everything when you're trying to spend that much money in 6 months.
Yeah, no, and this time we'll have more than that. Another thing what you were talking about with the language, it reminded me, I've heard several tribes talking about getting language apps where anyone can start learning the language on the app, which is really cool. I also see some support in the chat, that people would like to hear what other tribes are doing, and that it would be helpful to hear about projects with the funds. So that can be something that we build in. I see that it's 4:29. So clarifying question, do we want to do this while we're still TAC, or would it be better to wait until OTELA is launched? I'm kind of hearing that now would be better, what I'm reading into, to start thinking about these things for the future. Does that sound, am I reading it right?
I would say now, because if we're starting to having to come up with funding lists and needs and that type of thing, I think now is fine. Is better than later.
Perfect. Well, we'll put that on the, when we have our next TAC planning meeting, that will be part of the agenda. And for now, I've got follow-up to do, and I'll make sure to include all the items in the email that will go out tomorrow. And I think that leaves us with, yeah, that's everything. So I hope you all have a good rest of your day. Enjoy the afternoon, and hopefully over spring break you do something fun, and maybe we'll have some nice weather. Maybe not, but enjoy it. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Okay, bye.
Bye.